Mal, thank you. It's great to be here this afternoon. Welcome everyone. It's great to see some new and old faces here, and it's great to be here in Rowley. Just a quick shout out to Jesse Mazzi for helping us use this beautiful facility. So we'll just jump right in here. I'll just give a little background. I didn't really grow up in a major railroad family. My mother did work for Amtrak briefly in the early 70s, but my interest in trains was more just kind of just growing up as a kid, living in Newton, riding the D branch of the Green Line. These are back in the days before T trains routinely caught fire, so you know I had more of a idolized view of the MBTA than I think a lot of people do nowadays. But growing up, we had a condo up on Newfound Lake in New Hampshire, and you know, just driving around, my dad always kind of liked to take us on drives around the countryside, and every now and then, you know, would stumble across like an old set of railroad tracks, particularly Danbury, New Hampshire, driving over to Route 4. I'd always see the crossbucks in Danbury and be like, huh, you know, what was that? Why aren't there any trains there anymore? Like, what's going on with that, Dad? And he was like, oh, that's the old Boston and Maine Railroad. You know, it's been abandoned for a few years, and would drive by the little depot in Potter Place, and I always kind of filed it in the back of my mind. I was like, oh, you know, where'd that line go? Like, why aren't there any trains on that line anymore? And it just kind of sparked this interest in learning as much about this sort of lost railroad as I could. And, you know, even though pieces of it do very well still exist to this day in different formats, there's a lot of it that's very much kind of lost out there in the woods that I always sort of wanted to catalog and research and find out as much about as I could. And this is just sort of a summary of my journey for past 25 years, ever since I was in high school, basically. So I realized I forgot to cue up the intro theme to Star Wars right now, because this picture feels, this was a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. This is one of the, and I guess, you know, in a lot of ways, East Cambridge sometimes does seem like a galaxy far, far away. But this was taken in the East Cambridge freight yards late November 1996. Probably the first photo of Boston and Maine equipment that I've been able to locate in my archives. But, you know, just sort of a little snapshot. I was just kind of going by at the time. I saw it. I was like, oh, you know, it's kind of cool. You have Boston Engine Terminal under construction in the background. You have sort of the freight yards were definitely being phased out at that time. I mean, I think most of the freight business was out of the central core of Boston at that time. But I'm crazy enough to think if you had told my 14-year-old self that 25 years later this whole area would be unrecognizable, I don't think I ever would have believed you. I think roughly where I'm standing, you'd probably be right in the center of a Lamplighter Brewery right now, I believe, which, yeah, no, it's not the worst place to be, I admit, but much, much, much different from what my 14-year-old self saw in 96. Yep, the other, I figured I'd do one of the hardest shots to see early on. This was in April 1998, watching the old Boston Garden, and of course, as we know, the original North Station being torn down. It was really something to see. I mean, it was pretty fascinating seeing the inner workings of the building, and you know, I think it was a period of change around the Boston area. It was sort of one of the first major historic demolitions in the city, and kind of the transition into sort of the newer Boston as we know. One little interesting factoid about this demolition is that superstar defenseman Charlie McAvoy was 4 months old when I took this photo. And I don't know, I feel old saying that, but then this was a shot I took up in Meredith, New Hampshire. This was May of 1999. This, like I said, as a kid, we always sort of drove by the Winnipesaukee Scenic, the hobo operations in Meredith, Lincoln, etc. But sometimes I didn't really have time to stop and take photos. But this was just a day I happened to have that time. So I got a little shot of the Alco right there. You know, a lot of things have seemed similar there today, but a lot has changed. And I will give a little disclaimer that I'm not, sometimes like the engine, the technical details and stuff with engines and rolling stock sometimes escape me. I'm more of a locations guy. So if anywhere along the line, if anyone has any factoids they want to add in or anything, feel free to jump right in. I want to make sure this is interactive and not just me droning on. So this was Potter Place, June of 1999. That's my family's sob in the background of the photo, and not the best frame shot, but you know, my mom stopped the car. I asked her to kindly let me get out and take a few pictures, so she obliged. And yeah, we just, you know, as just that building, I always had such fond memories of as a kid, and even to this day, I still brings back a lot of nostalgia for me. So that was just kind of a moment of time. I stopped right there. Growing up, obviously getting into the hobby in the late 90s, early 2000s, I got plenty of chances to photograph some Guilford power. This was East Deerfield Yard in September of 1999. I distinctly remember a friend of mine and I took the drive out for the day. We did Worcester, Springfield, went up Route 5 up to East Deerfield, then came back via Route 2. I distinctly remember like Blink-182 was playing on the radio. I know I'm really dating myself right now, but they are. I think they're touring right now, right? So this we didn't have a scanner or anything that day. We just kind of got very lucky with catching some operations, and this was one of the great shots. Probably one of my favorite shots from my earlier days. I took from the quote-unquote Railfan Bridge. This was coming home. We stopped in Fitchburg. You can see the current commuter rail platform under construction in the background there. And again, sometimes you're just in the right place at the right time. This monster freight was racing through, and you know, one of the, definitely even to this day, I just remember that feeling of that train, you know, just racing by us. And yeah, just, it's amazing some of the things you just never forget. This was a local. I just happened to be in Lincoln, Mass one day. This would have been probably like 2004, 2005, so the job number would escape me, but it was a local going westbound through Lincoln, so I'm not quite sure at that time. Maybe it was coming from West Cambridge, Newlyweds, that area. But
no freight through there anymore, is it?
No, there hasn't been a... Yeah, again, it was just, I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. And this was the only time I ever caught a train on the Watertown branch. A buddy of mine was working on this one and just gave me a heads up, and you know, I just jumped. I think I was probably a sophomore at BU at the time. I raced out of my dorm room, got onto the 57 bus out to Alston, cut over to, and I was able to catch them. I think that's the School Street crossing in Watertown. And definitely not the best shot composition-wise, but that line is now a rail trail. So, you know, just things that you don't imagine at the time. This was in May of 2006. This was the Lakes Region Limited train, which was a charter. It was supposed to run between Lincoln and Concord, the whole 72 miles of the White Mountains, but there were washouts in Canterbury because of a pretty serious rainstorm a few days earlier. So they cut the trip slightly short. This shot I took in Bridgewater, roughly. There's a US Route 3 in the background there, approximately the site of the old passenger station, which I don't think was much more than like a little flag shelter. Okay, so now we are actually entering a different era. This was one of the first shots I took with my Nikon D80, so I had officially, in 2007, I entered the DSLR era, and just never looked back. You know, it was just amazing being able to take as many shots as you wanted to and editing them later, or in my case, just putting them all in your computer and running out of storage space. So, yeah, my wife can attest to many frustrating evenings dealing with you're out of storage. Your storage is full. You know, maybe delete one of those like 30 shots that all kind of look the same, but you know, in many ways they're all different. So this was Topsfield in 2007, the old Boston and Maine freight house, a few tracks in the foreground. At this time, freight had not run to Topsfield since, I believe, 1981. And this was very close to the time that the building got demolished. They put a rail trail in. And they built a new structure there, which kind of resembles a train station. So clearly, you know, they're trying to pay a little homage to the town's railroad heritage. This is a Caboose train coming through Plymouth heading north. Back back in 2008, 2009, I chased a few of these up on the White Mountains branch. A group of private caboose owners in Northfield would build these trains and run them north to Lincoln. It was always a pretty cool chase because, you know, they went fairly slowly, and it was paralleling Route 3 most of the time, so you could get some really nice shots, and definitely one of the more unique just sort of railroad consists you'd see in New England. And I believe it was 2012 they had to discontinue these due to insurance liability reasons.
I think that second caboose is the one that you shot in Cambridge.
Really?
Yeah, because the one they were using in Boston, they eventually painted in Guilford colors. And it looks like the end of it's in Guilford.
Really?
Yeah.
And this is why we need to have interactive presentations.
It's an Airbnb up in Canada somewhere now.
Really? Wow.
I like the fact that the first one behind the engine is apparently painted in Lionel colors.
Yeah. There was, and I think you have Leo's Party Caboose is the third one down in the consist. So.
Just as a note, the Lionel lines was the one originally owned by Don Provencher.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
And just one other interesting footnote, I actually learned this from Ben English's Trackside New Hampshire book. The mountain in the background is a little hard to see, but that actually used to be a ski mountain. It was Mount Frontenac. I think it operated till like the mid-60s or something, but you can still vaguely see the cuts of where the ski trails were. So just a little interesting local history. Like, I grew up going to this area all the time, and I never knew that. So. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I've loved the most about exploring the B&M is not even just the railroad, but all these towns have fascinating local history, and you just learn like all these little tidbits that are really quite interesting. This was taken in Newburyport. This was before they really constructed the rail trail. This crossing was right where the old depot used to be, right at Washington Street. Interesting older style crossbucks with the little bulbs and the lettering. And again, one of those things, you know, you probably drive through that crossing, hundreds of times a year and just don't even really think twice about it. Then all of a sudden it's gone, and you're like, oh, maybe I should have stopped and gotten a photo of it. So, it's oftentimes over the years I've found it's like these little details are what sort of made the Boston and Maine so interesting. Now we're up to Milford, New Hampshire. This was the branch off the Fitchburg Railroad. You can sort of determine that from the turret on the building. That was unique to the Fitchburg Railroad. And at the time, the branch actually ended here. It was called the Milford and Brook Line. And I hear the rumor was the B&M didn't want them to extend this line up into Manchester, so they built switches on the current day Hillsboro line that were sort of in the wrong orientation for the Milford and Brook line to successfully extend up into Manchester. So it's just an interesting little tidbit about this location. Then further south, this is the actual railroad station in Brookline, and one of the things, especially about these old B&M stations, I find so fascinating is that many times they've been repurposed into homes or businesses, but you can clearly tell whoever owns this home very much appreciates the original structure, because it's very easy to see it underneath the dormers they built, the addition on the back. They even kept the order board. Not sure if that's original or not, but this was in 2008, so I'm not quite sure if it's still in the present.
I think that's the original order board, because I remember seeing that building before much had been done to it. And you can see that's a high order board, because you can see the bottom of the pole.
Yep.
Right.
So I got a feeling wherever that was put, it stayed there.
Yeah, I think it is, yeah.
Yeah, again, just one of those buildings you're driving down. I think it's Route 13, and it comes up pretty quick. If you're not ready for it, you'll just drive right by it. But also, of course, the little station sign too. That's always a nice touch when you see those out in the field.
Before that was turned into a house, it was a snack bar for many years in the late 60s and early 70s.
Really?
Route 13 follows the old right-of-way.
Okay, yeah, I think I did know that about Route 13, but that's fascinating about it being the snack bar.
Has this been rotated 90 degrees from the original layout?
No.
It was not. Okay, there's another one up there that was.
Okay, 84 cars. I've already counted them, so you don't have to. Nobody has to worry about the car count. So for the past, about the past 20 years, I've been able to vacation up in the Pine Point section of Maine, which really, it's just really an incredible place. Between, you have a beautiful beach, you're right by downtown Portland, and of course, in my case, you do get some great train watching experiences. This was in late summer 2008. Again, just happened to be coming down Route 9, heading to visit my mother and stepfather at their beach house, and just, again, in the right place at the right time. I pulled on over, used my 24mm wide-angle lens, and was able to pretty much capture the whole consist. Claremont Junction, New Hampshire. This is just kind of more of sort of a documentary shot I took. Not the most exciting building, but just nonetheless, as I was going around trying to document as many of these stations as possible, I always just enjoyed knowing that even if a building wasn't serving railroad purposes, it was still standing and still kind of part of the experience at the location. This is a current stop on the Vermonter, and the building is, I'm not sure if it's still a bike shop to this day, but at that time it was.
That was a restaurant before it was a bike shop.
Oh, yeah, good location.
Steakhouse, I think. It's still bike shop.
Oh, okay.
Payphone's gone though.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
Lost history.
Same day, I captured the southbound Vermonter in Brattleboro. I've only seen the train come through Brattleboro a handful of times, but there's always a very large crowd waiting to get on. And the interesting thing about this photo is that building, it's kind of almost out of sight on the left there. That's the original Brattleboro Union Station, and you can even see up top there, it has like a white outline around it. That's where the covered walkway over the tracks used to be back in the day.
Yeah, went over and came down on the
Yeah,
side.
it's what amazes me about Brattleboro is I've seen some older shots of what the station used to look like, and it's always hard for me to believe that this in fact is the same place. It just seems so much more simplified these days than it was at one point in time.
Amtrak will be building a new station there.
Oh, really?
The riverside on the right-hand side is in your picture. I think the construction might start next year.
Okay, yeah, because they definitely need some. I mean, it's basically just a parking lot right now, and just given the level of pedestrian traffic they have there, I certainly think that warrants it.
The station is a museum, is it not?
Yes, actually, it's an art museum. Yeah, haven't gone inside there, but it does look like a really nice facility.
They just tore down I think it was the freight house up on the top of the hill there. They're going to put a new bridge across the Connecticut River.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Supplant those steel bridges that are there now.
Okay, yeah, I mean, the traffic does really back up there, so yeah, it's pretty bad. And the hills and the railroad crossing definitely don't help the situation.
Those bridges go back to the flood of 1927.
Yeah.
Wow.
So the taxpayers got their money's worth out of those.
They couldn't figure out who was going to pay for the bridge, though, New Hampshire or Vermont. I think it's Vermont that's going to foot the bill for it.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
Over to Connecticut?
Yeah.
Because technically the
right.
state of New Hampshire owns under the Connecticut. The state of Vermont begins at the water level on the further side. Those old Yankees in New Hampshire were smarter than the boys that came late in Vermont.
Is that back when Vermont was a country?
Could be, yeah.
That is back when Vermont was part of New York State.
So now we're in Goffstown, New Hampshire, not too far out of Manchester, part of the web of railroads in southeastern New Hampshire. I've admitted, even to this day, still kind of eludes me. Even last night, I was researching in Lindsell's northern New Hampshire railroads, just to kind of, I still have trouble grasping just the density of the railroads that serve these very small rural communities. Goffstown being one of them, but I mean, even the smaller towns, you can see the gingerbread detail on the depot, and there was such a train station was such a source of pride for a community, and it really reflects that in a lot of these smaller towns. This is a shot of the power for another Caboose train I chased. This one ran from Tilton up to Lochmere, then back down to Concord. This was in the spring of 2008. New England Southern Power, I believe that's Pete Dearness at the controls, I think. It's either him or Paul Hatch. Coming across the bridge from the Tilton side, old semi-force standing guard there. And really, Northfield has always been a really cool location, and it was, for me especially, it was really cool to see an actual active train there, because that's something that's really eluded me over the years, is New England Southern operations. So just actually seeing a locomotive come down those rails was pretty cool. This was another Caboose train. This is in Campton now. We're heading north. You see the tracks are sort of curving away from, I think it's the Mad River, and it's entering sort of the Pemigewasset Valley. This is right by the Route 49 crossing and the I-93 interchange. So those Caboose trains, I mean, they ran, it seemed like they were running quasi-frequently in the 08, 09, 2010 period. So it was I really got to familiarize myself with the Pemigewasset Valley branch and learned a lot of interesting photo locations, etc. Not everything you can see from the interstate when your dad's racing to go to Bretton Woods to go skiing. This was the next morning. They're coming south from Lincoln. A few golfers over there had their game interrupted for a few minutes, and got a little morning train watching there. But I've just always kind of loved the framing of this shot, and just the way the railroad really has kind of integrated with the landscape there and the development. Because I'm not sure when this golf course was put in, but my guess would be well after regular freight operations on this line ceased. Here we're back up in Maine now. We're in Old Orchard Beach, and most people would be pretty upset if they were walking from the beach to Dairy Queen and they had to wait for the local. Me, however, I grabbed my Nikon and I was, I was running, I was dodging a few cars to get this shot. And, it's interesting you say that, Carl. In all the years I've been going up to Maine, I've actually never heard of an incident at Old Orchard Beach with anyone being, which is...
I think they have like a 5 or 10 mile an hour speed limit during the summer season.
Yeah, it's just like the amount of foot traffic coming through there, like on a summer night, is just, it's pretty astonishing. So. Newport, New Hampshire, Claremont and Concord. Just not too much of a backstory behind this. Just one time I took a drive on the line, and it was being used as a daycare at the time, and I just thought it was a beautiful brick building. I like the little the central dormer in the center there with the semicircle. It was a nice touch, and just kind of a nice piece of a small town railroading. Now we're up in Lisbon, New Hampshire. This was in the summer of 2009. I've always found those dormers to be, in my opinion, I would argue this is one of the most beautiful small town B&M depots. You have the window dormers, just the roof lines, the order board, and I've seen older photos of the building in the 70s when freight was sort of winding down, and I distinctly remember somebody put a garage door on it, and it really looked like the building was gonna just kind of be phased out and eventually demolished. But hats off to Roger Robar for really leading the charge to, and actually that leads into the next shot. When I was in Lisbon, I had the pleasure of meeting Roger, he gave me a fantastic tour of the whole station, just a true gentleman in every definition of the word. He asked if I'd take his photo under the sign, and I've happily obliged. And actually, Rick, I was happy to hear in the last newsletter that he's still around and active, because I didn't really know like what he was up to these days, and just to hear that he's still...
He's around, but he's not very active. He's got real lung problems.
That's...
I had the opportunity to see him back in September. He couldn't leave the house to come down to the station, so I chatted with him there. But he informed me that that's one of only 2 stations with that roof design.
Really?
And I believe he said we have the blueprints for it in the archives. And if anybody would know, it would be Roger.
Yeah, I feel like he knows like every single inch of that building. And
Oh, he does.
He does.
Yeah, a year ago I went up to pick up, he donated a perfect lantern. It was Concord and Montreal lantern that's part of our collection.
Yeah.
And he a couple of other artifacts, but he's done a lot to make sure that that place was brought back and maintained.
It's fully restored.
Oh, yes.
I remember when it was still, I taught school up there in the late 60s and in Lisbon, and the railroad was still active.
Yeah, it does. I feel like I was just a little too young to witness the freight operations up that way, like the traffic to Berlin, and that was slightly before my time. And it must have been something to watch those like paper trains and.
And across the
Yeah.
river was the St. Johnsbury and Lake Coming.
Yeah. St. Jesus is like coming,
I'm
is what I
sorry.
heard. How I heard.
So now, later in that adventure, I found myself down in North Conway, and for any, I know. So here, what we have here is the OCS power, pre-OCS days. It was currently the Mountaineer power at that time, and it was just sitting in the yard. You know, it just seemed like a pretty picture with the station in the background, and just two really nice units that really found their way around a lot of different New England railroads over the years. So it was kind of nice to see them in this historical context. I actually forgot I had this photo, to be quite honest, and when I was digging through my archives to put together this presentation, I found it, and I was like, oh my God, it's the OCS, you know? Didn't know it back then in 2009, though, of course. Hancock, New Hampshire, former Manchester and Keene branch. Probably, from what I've read in books, one of the most brutal railroads that was ever built in the state of New Hampshire. Just massive trestles, very, very challenging terrain, and a line that just didn't yield a lot of revenue, and was, after the 1938 floods, I believe, is when abandonments are... 36, yeah, thank you. After the floods of 36, sections of it were already being abandoned, and it's just pretty amazing thinking of all the manpower that went into construct a lot of these lines, only to, Mother Nature will always win in the end, and just, having a lot of these lines just literally disappear into the woods. But always really liked this Hancock Depot, a little piece of rural New England railroading, and just the depot itself is actually kind of hidden off of a dirt road too. It's not right in the center of town, so you might not even know it's there.
They used to have a museum in there, but I think they moved things out, and I don't know if the museum is still there or not.
Was there a trail beside the depot to walk out onto the line a bit, or?
There was. It got pretty dense though, pretty thick, and it was. They're definitely there. They are trying to build, like, there's a rail trail now technically in Harrisville, I believe. They are trying to sort of piece what they can together of this line, but I think there are a few pretty massive trestles that are missing, and so I think there are a few pretty formidable crossings, but it seems like a few towns are trying to sort of reinstate it best they can. This was a little further away from Hancock, one town over actually, Bennington. This is the former what would have been the Hillsboro line in the B&M days, and prior to that, the Worcester and Concord. It was at one point part of a through route, believe it or not. And just one of those shots. I mean, nothing amazing. I was just kind of driving down 202, and just saw the tracks there, choked in the weeds, and I kind of like how you can't even see them in the distance. They just sort of vanish into the foliage there. This was one day I took a little drive up to Marblehead just to see what I could find. If you look carefully, you'll see my shadow first and foremost, but you'll also see some platform curving. I believe this was Beach Bluff. I wasn't.
You're right.
Yeah, I was trying.
Familiar.
Yeah, I was trying to locate it on like Google Maps, but as I can see my 91 Honda parked there, so this was clearly a while ago. But so that was kind of an interesting, there are little bits and pieces of the Marblehead branch here and there. I mean, a lot of it's kind of long gone, but you can still hike and bike the whole right of way, and there's some little pieces like that here and there that are always fun.
Called the Swampscott.
Oh, right, the Swampscott.
Going back close together.
I'm sorry?
You were there, was there? There's one road there, was there another one shortly behind you there?
I don't quite remember, to be honest with you.
That's Beach Bluff, That yes. would be Clifton Station.
Okay, so maybe I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't quite
That looks like
quite sure which of the two it was, but yeah, that would make sense as well. One of the things I love the most are the station signs. And what's really cool about them is even long after railroads get abandoned through towns and locations, you'll never know where these station signs will pop up. I lived in Arlington for a few years, and just got to know the town pretty well through exploring it. And I was going by Arlington Coal and Lumber in the Heights one day and saw the sign mounted right up on the building there. Unfortunately, it's no longer there to my knowledge, so I'm not quite sure what happened to it. But hopefully whatever did happen to it, it's still out there somewhere.
I believe this is the last customer on that line.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, that would.
Is it Lexington branch?
Yeah, this is the Lexington branch.
Went to Bedford.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then on to,
Well, Larson Lumber was just down the road a bit, and he was just a distributor.
This is another shot back on the Hillsboro branch. This one was taken in late November. Again, just happened to be in the right place at the right time with the light, the curvature of the tracks through the pond, and yeah, just kind of a typical shot of I believe the tracks were technically only out of service at the time. I don't think they were actually abandoned, but I don't know, it looks like quite some time since something had been through there.
Is that the Y track just east of Elmwood Junction?
Yeah, it wasn't far from Elmwood Junction. I'm trying to...
this is Magoon's Curve. This was put in 1952 to bypass Elmwood Junction.
Oh, okay. I never realized there was a name
Yeah, they
for
used
it.
to-
That's
they used to have
interesting.
to go to Elmwood and go around the Y to get to Hillsboro and Bennington, and then in 52, I think, Eddie Magoon was a section man from Greenfield, and he said, why don't we just put a curve in instead, bypass Elmwood completely? And that's what they did.
We rode the track house on that 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, good to know it's still there.
They spent a ton of money to brush cut the entire line, and then it looks like 1954 through there. It's all right down to the water line.
Wow. Oh, that's good to hear.
Go to the middle there.
Yep.
Yeah, 86, I think, was the last train.
Still a captive rail car there.
And contemporary MBTA commuter rail shot, but just one I've always liked nonetheless. Crossing the Manchester Drawbridge, about to pull into Manchester Station. Just one of the typical images of North Shore railroading.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes.
So now I had the pleasure of doing several explorations with Ben English Jr. up in the North Country of New Hampshire, which was really great because for many years there were these places I wanted to explore, but they were always very remote, and I was always a little intimidated by going to some of these places. But after I read Ben's trackside book, I reached out to him and we corresponded a few times, and he very kindly offered to take me on a tour of a lot of these locations, and we had a few fun outings just exploring the remains of the North Country railroads and Bethlehem Depot in Bethlehem, New Hampshire, and its dilapidated cousin Maplewood will make an appearance a little later in this presentation. But yeah, we just pulled up, and it was just such a beautiful building. I had to document it at the time, and I believe it still looks pretty much like it does in this photo from 2010. Case in point, Groveton, New Hampshire. I remember looking at that in my Delorme Gazetteer when I was probably 16 years old, thinking like, when the heck am I going to get all the way up there? But Ben very kindly offered to take me up there, and we drove up, and I took this photo of the depot. Not much was going on that day, but it was pretty cool to just get to the northernmost extremity of the Boston and Maine system. Just one of those locations you see photos of and you hear about, and you're like, oh, I wonder what it's like up there. And the answer to that was very quiet on this day.
That was a joint station.
Yeah, I think.
Grand Trunk Inn.
Yeah, Grand Trunk. Yep.
Main Central, wasn't it? Or was
Oh,
that
the Main Central go up there too?
Main Central would have been, where?
Lancaster?
Lancaster, right, for the Main Central.
Okay. Oh, that's right, because they had their own way into Groveton.
Yeah, they came in.
Now this was pretty cool too. This was kind of right in the center of town. We have the conquered 146 miles, just to give you context of how far north Groveton is. Now this would have been via Plymouth, Woodsville, and Whitefield back in the day, via the Concord and Montreal. So just pretty cool to see the milepost still sitting kind of right there in the center of town. Hopped out, grabbed a photo of that.
That was closer to Canada than the United States.
Oh yeah, much closer to Canada. Now we're back in definitely not one of my best photos, but just interesting to see how these B&M structures can get, integrated into other structures over the years. This is the freight house in Rochester, New Hampshire, which at one point had multiple rail lines radiating out of it in all directions. And nowadays it's pretty quiet for the most part, with the daily or week, several times a week, the New Hampshire North Coast. But yeah, just thought the brick freight house was interesting, and then you have that other structure built into it. This was taken in Ayer, Massachusetts. Not sure if the locals still hang out there on Sunday mornings, but I went by there one Sunday and they were out there to greet one of the freights coming through, and yeah, just different. Looks a little different today now in 2022 as it did in 2010.
To the right of the engine is an old section house.
Yeah, that's right. It's tough to see there, but yep, it's there. And I don't know if that's still there today, but okay, yeah, I don't really get out to Ayer too often. This was up in Scarborough again, the old Eastern running through the Marsh. Again, just happened to be out there late in the afternoon one September day and caught this, just the clouds, the sunlight. It's just a very beautiful scene that, must have been a real treat to ride through on a train back in the day.
That's a beautiful walk from Pine Point to Scarborough.
It is.
I've done that several times.
Yeah, to this day, every summer that I'm up there, I make it a point to get out on the trail here, because as long as you bring your bug spray, you'll be. Okay, so here we are in Ashwelet. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Now, I'd like to ask if anyone has a photo as to what this depot looked like before it looked like it does in this photo. I'd be very fascinated to see it. Yeah, it's by far one of the most interesting structures I've seen. Almost kind of reminds me of like a Lego set or something, but just yeah, just an interesting building. So more contemporary shot of Potter Place. The colors are the same as they were when I stopped there with my mother, and this was in 2010. That was my little Subaru Impreza at the time parked in front, and yeah, just one of those locations I always like to stop in when I'm driving by, because I feel like it looks nicer every time I see it. Bless you. Over into Westboro. That's the old Westboro station, and the Concord and Claremont, I believe, the engine there. And yep, the old Westboro station. When I found out that still stood, I wanted to go grab a shot of that, because we get to the next picture here. I don't believe any of that is currently still standing, and even yeah, so the Westboro roundhouse, turntable, yeah, it's pretty much all gone today. And when I took this photo in 2010, it looked like it didn't have much time left. So as ugly as a scene as it kind of was, I knew I had to document it, because soon enough it would be gone completely. One of my favorite abandoned lines in New Hampshire is definitely the Plymouth to Woodsville of the old Boston, Concord, and Montreal. I always just found it fascinating what a rural area it ran through, what a rural area it served, how it was abandoned fairly early on, and a lot of the right-of-way is still accessible to this day. This is the tangent track between Plymouth and Rumney that runs through the Quincy area of Rumney. And it's just, it must have been pretty cool back in the day. I always thought, like, waiting for a train on a cold night at Quincy and seeing a headlight maybe 4 miles down the track coming at you. Yeah, so I've always enjoyed getting out to explore different parts of this line, and it's pretty cool to know how much of it is still left. This was actually another journey with Ben English Jr. That's his Subaru Legacy right there. We're actually driving part of the old right-of-way between Warren and Glencliff. Little signal base down there covered in moss. But the line, like I said, it's pretty accessible, and many parts of it are easily drivable by most vehicles. So it's not as many artifacts left out there as I was hoping, but still pretty cool nonetheless, just to kind of be in that area. Okay, does anyone know where we are? Anyone? All right, that's the cellar hole at Glencliff, New Hampshire. That was that was quite the find, I'll tell you. But it was pretty cool nonetheless, just to know that something. Because I remember distinctly in his trackside book, there was a picture of Glencliff Station in the mid '60s. So I was thinking, okay, that wasn't that long ago. So there's got to be something, and we found what was left, and it wasn't pretty. In the foreground, it looks like there was an old refrigerator dumped in there on the lower left. So, but pretty cool nonetheless. Apparently, from what I heard, is the local fire department burned it down as a training exercise. It must have been sometime after 1965. This was really cool, actually. Something you would drive by every time in the summertime when there's foliage out. But this was a massive bridge abutment right around Pike, New Hampshire. And just, again, like we were just driving by, and I mean, November, I think, is a great month for doing all this because the foliage is mostly gone, but you don't have snow yet. So you kind of have, it's almost like a curtain is lifted and you can see so much in the woods that you would ordinarily miss every other time. And this is clearly an example because the times I've driven by in the summer, there's absolutely no evidence it's back there. Haverhill Station. This is, I remember as a kid going to the Gordon Nash Library in New Hampton, New Hampshire, and finding, actually, I didn't realize it at the time, but it was a copy of Hastings' fantastic pictorial book about the Boston and Maine. And he had a really cool shot of this depot with like a 52 Cadillac parked in front of it. And I just remember thinking, like, wow, that is a cool picture. And it's, I mean, in a lot of ways, like the location's clearly changed very much, but in some ways it, still has that familiar feel. You can kind of see the curvature of the tracks down to where that like red garage is, and just, it was an interesting modern day juxtaposition for that location. Newbury, New Hampshire, where they put a little caboose, put a milepost for the Concord and Claremont, just a location I was driving by one day, and had some, I lucked out with the light too, very vibrant. Contemporary Downeaster shot, heading south through Dover with the festive wreath on the front. Now we're in Epping. Worcester, Nashua, and Portland. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Like with all the highway construction, you have the modern day Route 125. Then you have these massive stone abutments that have remained untouched since, I guess, the 1930s, I would imagine. Yeah, so pretty incredible because the state of New Hampshire, like when they do highway improvements, many times there's absolutely they'll erase all evidence of anything. I'll tell you specifically up in Plymouth, for many years I was adamant I'd find like the Baker River crossing of the White Mountains Division, only to find out years later that New Hampshire DOT completely erased it when they built the off-ramp for 93.
I noticed recently that behind you would be the other embankment, and last time I went through there, they actually leveled the embankment down.
Really?
I don't know why. They might be putting a road up there or something.
Oh, interesting.
But,
it's pretty incredible. Like they can really erase a lot of evidence I've learned over the years. Just more. Yep, East Kingston. Just love I've always loved that depot. How it just looks like an old colonial home.
It was for sale.
Then we got Ossipee, New Hampshire. My most recent Andrews Excursions article features Ossipee, New Hampshire, and the depots. It's been sold several times in the recent years, and I think it was back on the market not too long ago. I'm not quite sure what. Unfortunately, it does have the new roof and the new chimneys, but I mean it seems to fit many other definitions of a complete fixer-upper. So. But, someday maybe somebody will be able to really bring it back to its former glory, because it really was a remarkable structure at one point in time.
Well, it dates back to Eastern Railroad days.
Yeah. Here we are. This was another Ben English adventure. This was in Wambeck Junction. Again, another place that I never quite wanted to hike into by myself. But, we did a hike in there, and it was just pretty cool to see a decent amount still exists in there, and obviously there's a lot that's no longer there. This was another find in the woods just south of Whitefield, milepost hidden in the woods. Again, that would be Concord by way of Plymouth and Woodsville, 125 miles. And this was a stone arch we found just south of Whitefield. Ben knew that it was in the area, but it was very difficult to determine where the exact location was from hiking on the roadbed, just because you couldn't quite really tell. But we passed it a few times, and finally we sort of figured out where it would be sensible for it to be, and we were able to make our way down. And it's kind of hard to see in this photo, but the center keystone actually has the year 1892 etched on it, which definitely one of the cooler arches I've seen in my years of doing this. And again, case in point, you don't always need a train to have a beautiful photo. This was heading out from Wambach Junction towards Berlin. The trails in the foreground there, and obviously you got the presidentials over there. It was mid-May, so we still have plenty of snow on top of the mountains, and just one of the shots I've taken that over the years I've always kind of come back to when I sort of assemble what I think are some of my better works. Then we eventually made it to Berlin as well. Yeah, unfortunately, the passenger station is still standing, but it's kind of seen some rougher days. I feel like it could be a really nice restaurant or brewery or something if somebody with the right, the right skill set and right wherewithal can get their hands on it and restore it.
There was a guy that reached out to us maybe 2 years ago. He wanted to make it a brewery.
Oh, no.
And he wanted it to be Boston and Maine themed, but I
Really? Wow.
I saw it on the market again recently, so maybe.
Wow. Yeah, it's overhead shot of the Downeaster. This is in Pine Point, looking north from the Route 9 bridge. Then we're down in the marsh now. This is Winnock's Neck Road, just north of Pine Point. Yeah, it's a really, you can get a lot of really neat photos out in the marsh. And like I said, as long as you bring your sunscreen and your bug spray, you're good to go. Lighting's not great in this shot, but I just had to include it. This was the steam through the notch run that they ran in the summer of 2011. You can see the headlight of the engine in the background reflecting on the coaches of the steam engine. And yeah, just really cool to, see the steam at North Conway. It gives it a real historical context. Another contemporary shot at Manchester by the Sea. Just you have the fishing boats, you have the rowboats, and you have the train. Kind of just adds to the whole North Shore experience. Yep. So, unfortunately, the cabooses are no longer there. This is South Deerfield. I don't even know if the farm stand's still open there, but yeah, it was always a neat place to stop, photograph the cabooses, and in this case it was mid-October, so I was able to get all the proper fall accoutrements in the foreground. This was interesting. This was a day in Andover, Mass. At the time. I did a day hike with the Appalachian Mountain Club, and afterwards I noticed there was this MBTA work train on the commuter rail line, and the light was just really nice, and it was stopped right by the businesses here. That the parking lot's right adjacent to the track, so I was able to grab that nice late afternoon shot. So now we're head over to the Cheshire branch. This is heading into 2012 now. This is Fitzwilliam, which was on its way to being restored. Doesn't seem like it was fully restored at this time, and it's a little hard to see, but on the firehouse next to the station, you can see the Fitzwilliam sign mounted above the bay doors. Again, so it just goes to show you, if you get to a location, if the station's still there, but you notice the sign missing, always check the buildings around it, nearby. You never quite know who might have gotten their hands on it over the years, and obviously in this case, the local fire department had the wherewithal to preserve it and mount it.
I think the fire department owns the station.
Oh, they do. Okay, that would make sense.
They could use their ladder to go up and take the sign off.
Exactly. This is Northampton, New Hampshire, on the eastern. Not too long before the tracks were removed, but they were still there at the time. Service had long ended at this time, but beautifully restored station. I think it still is a real estate office to this day. So, as many will attest, one of the things I love just as much as the Boston and Maine Railroad is a fine beer. So when I can combine the two of them, that's really an ideal scenario for me. This is Gorham, Maine, and the Sebago Brewing Company, and I believe they just renovated the inside of it fairly recently. I haven't been there in a few years, but yeah, it was, the tracks I think were pulled up here in like 1961 or something along those lines. But yeah, it's always great when you see these local businesses, you know, appreciate and repurpose these stations, and you know, if you can get a cold frosty beverage there, I mean, what's not to love?
Is that still a restaurant?
I think, yes, I believe it is. They built a big new distribution facility, sort of like right behind where I'm standing in more recent years, because they've upped their production over the years. But I always, I've always enjoyed that building, and the beer's pretty good too. Wolfboro, New Hampshire, one of the. Again, you look at the depot down the road in Ossipee, then you look at this depot. You know, you can kind of see what could potentially be. We got some Winnipesaukee scenic action. This is along Neal Shore Road in Meredith. We're right by the Concord 36-mile post, I believe, and just a typical summer shot. Yeah, they're out of sight, but you got the lakeside cottages on the right, and then. So this, I always love the atmosphere of this shot. I'll tell you though, the drive on 89 to get to this place on this day was absolutely terrifying. But it was worth it when I arrived. They were doing like just the combine coach, the depot, just sort of I really wish I could replace that Volvo wagon with like a 1952 Dodge or something, and it would be like the perfect winter New England shot, and maybe extend those tracks a little ways too. Winter shot of Potter Place, just caught that. Yeah, luck again. Sometimes it's just timing. I just lucked out. It was a late December day, had that low light, and just accented that maroon and gold that we all love. Overhead shot of the Downeaster at UNH. So now we're up at Spring Haven on the Lakeshore line. Not the Lakeshore line to Chicago, mind you, the Lakeshore line along Lake Winnipesaukee. This building at the time was bought by the campground, or was owned by the campground behind it, and they were restoring it. I believe it was supposed to be like the offices or something along those lines. And there was a gentleman working inside there this day, and he showed me around the interior, and it was really interesting. Just another typical small town, rural New Hampshire railroad depot. But there are people out there that really appreciate these buildings and want to see them repurposed. So it was really. What's that?
This was on the Lakeport branch.
Yeah, the Lakeport branch. Oh, no worries. So, one of the themes in my Andrew's Excursion articles, I like to think of so much of this stuff as hidden in plain sight. How many thousands of people probably drive under these bridge abutments and have no idea what these were? But it's, at the time, back in the day, there was quite an impressive bridge that crossed, I think it was Paradise Road you just said, Bill?
Correct, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so I mean, it's pretty fascinating how some of these items just blend right into the landscape.
Now, what was this, the old East?
Paradise Road and Swampscott?
This was the Swampscott branch.
Oh, the Swampscott branch, okay.
Another shot of North Conway. This was late June, and it always amazed me how quiet the yard was this day when I was driving by. I had photographed the Climb to the Clouds road rally a little further north that day and just made this stop on the way home. Then even further south, I lucked out and happened to catch a Pan Am, probably a POAY freight going through at the time. Not the best photo, but you know, I drove down that road pretty quick when I saw it coming and hopped out with the Nikon. Another Marsh shot crossing the trestle. Yeah, telephoto lenses are always great in the Marsh. Raymond, New Hampshire. Didn't want you to think you'd have no Manchester and Portsmouth on this presentation, Rick. Oh, it is. Oh, that's great. Yeah, I really love that depot in Raymond. You can tell the Historical Society takes a lot of pride in it, and it's just...
Very nice display in it.
Yeah, great to see that. This is actually right down the street from where I currently live. This is Stoneham, Massachusetts. Nice little depot, kind of tucked away on a side street.
Is that the insurance company?
I think it is, Bill. It's either that or a credit union. Yeah, I just love this little brick depot. It's kind of tucked away off of a side street, and you just, you just kind of Stoneham, Massachusetts. Another shot of freight activity in Old Orchard Beach. Again, not the greatest lighting, but it was just kind of a nice sort of twilight shot in the summer. Freight was just coming right through. And, Amtrak commemorative unit in Saco. Yeah, not the greatest photo, but again, just kind of happened to be in the right place at the right time. So my father-in-law, who I'm very grateful is in the audience right now, will remember when we saw this. We went out to North Adams to check out the Hoosac Tunnel Museum, and then we went to the tunnel itself. I remember thinking the freight schedule is so erratic, I was like, oh, there's no way we'll see a train here. But sure enough, maybe like 15 minutes after we pulled in, we heard the horn in the distance. We're like, okay, time to get in position, and we were treated to this massive auto rack train. Really, my first ever visit to the Hoosac Tunnel, and it definitely didn't disappoint me. Here's the Winnipesaukee Scenic Fall Foliage Special. Just out of sight to the right is the common man, which at one point was a plant that used to manufacture the little wooden paddles for hoodsie cups. And I believe... Yeah, so so next time you're enjoying your hoodsie cup, just think of a little bit of trivia for you right there. Yeah, so the train stops here, and the participants, the passengers disembark and have a lunch in the common man, and the train then runs around down at Plymouth.
So what's that, Ashland?
This is Plymouth, just north of Plymouth Depot.
Okay.
Further up the Boston, Concord, and Montreal, we're in Wentworth now. Got two mileposts out front. I don't believe they're restored, but yeah, just a nice building, not in its original location. For many, many years, it was in the lumber yard that was adjacent to the right-of-way, and I remember seeing photos of it from like the 90s. It was in very, very rough shape, so fortunately the town, I believe, had the resources and the wherewithal to preserve it, because it really is another remarkable, like, small town New Hampshire structure.
I saw that shortly after it had been moved, and I think the guy that helped move it was Al Ports. Does that name sound familiar to anyone? I think he was associated with the lumber company, but I have not seen that since it was first moved up there, so it looks great.
Yeah, it really does. The inside too is really, really nice.
Can you read? My eyes aren't good enough. Can you read the sign?
I think the white sign says Wentworth Historical Society. Then you have the B&M, the blue enamel sign on the...
Yeah, I could see that one, but so it's probably a local historical society.
Yeah.
With the town.
Yeah. Now we're south in Windham, New Hampshire, amidst some brilliant fall foliage. This is where at one point in time the Manchester and Lawrence crossed the Worcester, Nashua, and Portland. So the depot was kind of constructed in an interesting exterior configuration to accommodate the diamond and everything. Now the Manchester and Lawrence is a pretty prominent rail trail, and the Worcester, Nashua, and Portland is more of a kind of a rustic trail, I'd say, sort of more suitable for ATVs. Another freight train on Scarborough Marsh. Over the years I've just taken a lot of photos up there, and yeah, you can get some really interesting shots with the tides and the light. It's a very, very great location for a photographer. Bedford, Mass. I think, Rick, I believe you and James are heading here tomorrow. Yeah, so, really nice freight house, baggage wagon, got the Bud car. Yeah, there's a lot of really great stuff at Bedford, and the depot, you can just barely see it to the far left there in the background. So it's a very, very nice facility that's been very well preserved, and just a testament to how rail trails and railroad history can easily coexist.
Some people may remember Jim Shea, who was the founder. He just passed away a month or two ago, very suddenly. He was the impetus behind restoring that freight house, which was originally the Bedford and Billerica narrow gauge engine house.
Mm. Yeah, a lot of...
Restoring the Bud RDC there.
Yeah, a lot of interesting history in Bedford. Okay, so the story behind this shot, this is actually the interior of the Northampton, Massachusetts train station. So the story behind this was in the summer of 2016. So my now wife and then fiance, we were looking at wedding venues because we knew we wanted to get married in the Pioneer Valley. So we were just kind of casually looking around the Northampton, Amherst area. And, you know, I just happened to discover online that the Northampton Depot, you know, just very, very coincidentally, you know, just found out the Northampton Depot was now a banquet facility. So we booked a time to check it out. The proprietor, a gentleman named Steve, gave us an outstanding tour, really took us behind all the scenes, and really a remarkable building in every way, shape, and form. And unfortunately, it did not end up being the final wedding venue. We used it for our rehearsal dinner, which was also lovely, but we ended up going to the Lord Jeffrey down the road, but there wasn't a lot of outdoor space at this depot unless you count the train platform. So it was, but it was a really remarkable facility, and we had a fantastic rehearsal dinner there. So it was just a really great way to, you know, just kind of integrate something that I'm passionate about. So it was just really a nice facility all around.
Were you able to sample the subterranean bar?
Yes, we did. The tunnel bar. Yep, we still go there every so often. Yeah, it's a great place to get a drink. So if you're ever in the Northampton area.
And you can hear the rumble of the over the top.
Yeah, so it's just, if you're ever in the Northampton area, check this place out because it's really fantastic. Southbound Vermonter at White River Junction. Then I took a ride in the Dome car on the Downeaster when it was available. This was heading through the Marsh and Scarborough. You got the old Boston and Maine era telegraph pole, long since discontinued, but just kind of adds to that whole atmosphere of the ride. So one of the things my wife and I also love to do is we explore a lot of the rail trails in the area. That's actually her in front of me on her bike, and this was on the old B&MRRHS branch. Not sure what that overhead crossing would have been at one point. I was trying to locate it on Google Maps, but I wasn't successful. But
The New Haven came through there too, didn't they?
I think they did. So I just always.
There might also be a trolley line out there.
Yeah, it could have been, but I always. Yeah, like what she was riding ahead of me, I just saw her riding through these abutments, and I was like, wow, that's a really cool picture. And just the artifacts that you can find along these rail trails are just really outstanding. So. This is probably one of my favorite foliage shots. This is Madison, New Hampshire, looking north towards North Conway, and long abandoned Conway branch. At the time, I think the Silver Lake Railroad tourist operation was still running in the summers, but obviously it was shuttered for the winter by the time I came through for this fall shot. But just again, another shot of an abandoned railroad, long forgotten. Just went up to Wachusett to check out the new commuter rail facility, and just kind of an interesting place how they built the layover track sort of higher up the grade than the freight tracks down below. Springfield Union Station. This building was shuttered in, I believe, 1973, and just kind of was very blighted for a very long time. But then I think Richard Neal sort of really led the charge to get this building restored and up and running as a railroad facility. Because I'll tell you, I don't have any photos of the Springfield Amtrak station in here, the previous predecessor to this, for obvious.
Didn't miss much.
No, but
Beautiful restoration.
yeah, we went to the my wife and in-laws and I. We went to the open house when they reopened it and rededicated it, and as you can see, I mean, the whole city was very, very excited about this building, and rightly so. It really is beautiful inside and out, and I mean, it's something that city should be extremely proud of, in my opinion.
A lot of old photos around the walls.
Yeah, it's really remarkable. Like, no detail was left untouched.
Yeah, Congressman Neal is a heavy hitter in Washington.
Yeah.
And he is pushing for rail service between Boston and Springfield and Pittsfield and maybe Albany.
Yeah, it's with another opening.
And if anybody can do it, he can do it.
So this is obviously North Station, the city of Boston. There's a new pedestrian bridge constructed over the tracks, which really allows for some great, a great vantage point to watch the action. And again, just kind of being in the right place at the right time. You have the Downeaster and you have an MBTA local juxtaposed right next to each other. And just a Downeaster detour shot in Reading. Yeah, not the usual routing for the train, but ironically, back in the day, this was the original Boston and Maine, so it's always nice when I see that Downeaster detouring through these towns.
When this society was first formed, our meetings were inside the Reading.
We were in that Reading Depot in 1971, 73.
Yeah, I think it's like a baker. It's a realty office and a bakery now. Danvers Depot. This I don't know if this is still standing. I tried to contact. Little tangent. I tried to contact the oil company about potentially getting a look inside on behalf of the society before it gets demolished. I'm not sure what the status is, but yeah, they did not reply to me, so I'm not sure what that status is. But a really beautiful structure, and it suffered a fire, but it's still just the integrity of the building. It's
Two depots in Danvers at one point.
yeah, there was quite a complex of rail lines in that Peabody Danvers area. Another overhead at North Station. This is the dome car this time. Just a lonely ball signal at Whitefield. Another shot of the local rail fans greeting Auto Rack coming through Ayer. Shot of the hobo crossing Route 175, just coming out of North Woodstock and heading towards Fairview, I believe would have been the next stop on the line. Clinton Tunnel on the Central Mass.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I don't know if I like the graffiti or if I hate it. It kind of like it's sort of, I don't know if it adds to the image or detracts from it, but it's, I really hope at someday when they finish this rail trail that they can incorporate this tunnel and possibly rebuild that bridge that was over the reservoir. I doubt that'll happen, but I mean, how cool must have that been back in the day to ride out of the tunnel and over the reservoir on that bridge?
I think there's money appropriated to work on that tunnel and connect it to whatever the rail trail is further to the west, I think.
Yeah, I know a gentleman, Craig Della Penna, I think he did a presentation for us. He's very active with... my father-in-law asked me if there would be any shots of the Bernardston Arch, so Jim, there you go.
It's a good shot, too.
Yeah, that was, this was actually 2018, the weekend of the Springfield show. We went out a day early. My wife and father-in-law went skiing, and I was like, maybe I'll do a little train photography in the valley, and I ended up chasing the Vermonter all the way down to Springfield. Yep, got it in the late afternoon light from the parking garage from the new Springfield station, which if you have a few hours to kill in Springfield, it is a great location to catch a lot of action. And another interior shot of the station without the crowds. You can just see like the attention paid to the detail, the archwork, the floors. Just a really beautiful building. Milepost in Northampton, Springfield 17. This is Rumney Marsh in Revere, Keolis, our MBTA local, crossing that, heading towards either Newburyport or Rockport. Now you can file this under things I thought I'd never see in my lifetime. The Red Ball Special 2018, this is the last year it was run, and I don't know if they'll ever do it again. I mean, I feel like jury's kind of out on that, but just a remarkable sight to see with the F unit and just then the back side of it. Yeah, again, just a really amazing thing to witness firsthand. Then we get to Plymouth in the fall. Lincoln in the fall. We have Rogers in the background gearing up for another ski season. Trees look like they're on fire, and we have the Hobo Railroad heading south for a little foliage viewing. Then we find Then down in Plymouth, this is the foliage special doing the runaround in Plymouth. And I just ask you to take note of the freight house building in the background there, because in a few minutes we'll see a more contemporary view. This was in 2018. And just kind of interesting too, it looks like there's an old like 69 Buick Skylark there in the background. So some of the areas I haven't quite been as lucky with, Nashua, Manchester, and Concord, New Hampshire, I have very few shots of operations there. And this is sadly probably the best shot I have of Concord, New Hampshire. So yeah, I've just never quite been at the right place at the right time up that way. But I kind of like this shot nonetheless with the Pan Am truck in the foreground. And it's a pretty sizable train for that area too. Snow shot in Exeter. The CSX Power, which nowadays seems extremely ironic. I guess they never had to put the cross out on the logo, but yeah. Another Plymouth shot. This was actually, you might be able to spot yourself in that crowd over there, because that was the day of one of our Plymouth meetings. Now this was an interesting charter on the Pompanusic line. This was, I believe, a group of Dartmouth College alumni chartered this special train that ran from White River Junction to Wells River and back. This was taken at Norwich, which is just across the river from Dartmouth College and north of White River Junction. So that was a really fun chase. It was a long drive from Boston for the day, but I got some really great shots, I like to think. So is it Ely or Eli? Ely, okay. Yeah, I've always wondered that is it Ely or Eli? But beautiful building nonetheless. I always wanted to photograph a train going by it. So then crossing a farm road in Newbury, Vermont. So I think you can't really see the Connecticut River, but in the background there, that would most likely be New Hampshire, because you're very, very close to the river at this point. Then Wells River station site. Station's long gone, but just kind of cool to see the passenger train in such a historic railroad location. Now we're back in Troy, New Hampshire, which I believe is in the process of acquiring a Bud car to display in front of that building, which, I mean, that'll look really remarkable. So it's beautiful.
Have they put back some track?
As of this photo, they hadn't, but I mean, I assume if they get a rail car to display there, they will.
They got rails and ties donated to them by Vermont Rail System, so they have some track.
Okay, who knows where we are? Anyone? This is Bristol, New Hampshire. I have always been obsessed with finding any remains of the Bristol branch, mainly because my family had the condo on Newfound Lake, and this was the closest Boston and Maine history to that area. But I believe this is part of the foundation of the old station building, and they're building a rail trail to Profile Falls from the depot site. So there's a lot. It's a lot easier to get down there and access it. So I'm hoping to get there now when the foliage is gone and really take a good look. And I believe that's the remains of a railroad tie right there, or it could just be a log. Who knows? Okay, so now we have a more contemporary OCS shot. This was taken in Portsmouth. It's always a treat to see that train, which sadly is no longer with us.
I don't know if the economy will get it back with CSX.
Yeah, they moved it down.
Yeah.
I read somewhere those engines are for sale down by CSX.
Yeah, I think there was a thread on Facebook I saw about that. But now we're back in East Deerfield. This was a train heading west through the Hoosac Tunnel that I caught off of the Railfan Bridge. Then a few minutes later, caught it in Greenfield. I'm standing on the platform on the Connecticut River main line, and it's heading towards the tunnel there. Chesham on the Manchester and Keene branch, another just very, very rural location, but very nice train depot with a sign and everything. And lighting is not good in this shot, but you can see the Harrisville depot in the background, which was actually also shared with the town of Dublin too. But on the foreground, the milepost says N45 for Nashua, and I believe Keene was about 12 miles from here. So interesting to see quite a few of those posts still survive. Bennington, New Hampshire, the old station there. Another shot of the Hoosac. My wife and I were in North Adams a few years ago for a wedding, and we made a stop by the Hoosac. Unfortunately, actually, I think we did see a high rail truck go through, but no train. I wasn't as fortunate as I was the first time I went to the Hoosac, but still pretty cool to see it, especially in October. You know, you get a very kind of sort of like surreal, almost kind of creepy feeling there. So it's a very, very interesting place. Trains or no trains. This is a testament to the fact that you should always try to revisit locations because you never know what you might find the second or third time. This is the former site of the Quincy flag stop on the Boston, Concord, and Montreal. And I had seen that concrete slab a few times in prior visits, but I just hadn't really done the math on it. Turns out that's actually the step to the old shelter that was actually relocated to Vermont a long, long time ago. Which is pretty amazing that, you know, that'll probably just be there for the next 100 years, who knows. But always just great to know that if you really look around and maybe revisit a place once or twice, you'll never know what you might see on those subsequent visits. Later that same day, I was up in Woodsville. I traced the Boston, Concord, and Montreal again. Yeah, whoever said it's so sad, I couldn't agree with you more. What was once such a busy railroad location is really... I mean, there's obviously nothing here, but I mean, and occasional movements on the Vermont side. But really, if you had told someone coming through here 50, 75 years ago what it would look like today, I mean, I think the only good thing I can say about Woodsville is I got a really great parking space right there. Yep. Had I yep, this was, I'm glad I really stuck around and photographed this Maplewood station. This was October 25th of 2019, because had I known that in a few more years it was going to be totally gone, but I think I was able to really capture the sort of creepy feeling of the building, and you could tell it's really, I'm always astonished how long it survived until eventually it was. Yeah, they did try to save it. I think it was just too little too late. And I hear rumors here and there about like a group that wants to rebuild it, but I don't know. In my opinion, it's just kind of, it's just not the same, you know. But just a really, really fascinating historic railroad location. Now we're out in Westford, Mass. At the massive Stone Arch Bridge on the Nashua and Acton, I think it was. Yeah, quite... Really, really astounding. These arches are just like, I'm always in awe when I see them. That just the engineering and it will be there forever. It's pretty incredible. Then a smaller one a little further north in Dunstable. It always blows my mind to think of like heavy tonnage of locomotives and freight, even in the earlier eras, passing over such a, kind of looks like a scrawny, I mean, I look at this, I'm like, I don't even know if I'd want to drive like my car over this, let alone a locomotive, but I mean, they did it and it's still there, so. Shot of the Vermonter heading south along US Route 5, just south of Northampton. Just, again, just lucked out with the light. Late November, I think it was like Thanksgiving weekend. I just got lucky with the light. CT Rail in Springfield, which now serves between New Haven and Springfield. It's it's good to see with the renovated Union Station. There's a lot more passenger train activity, and you know, Connecticut especially seems to really be making a push to have a higher level of service. This is in Topsfield. Shout out to my friend Brett, who's here from Topsfield. Boston, 24 miles from here via the old Newburyport line. Now a rail trail. This is Sutton Street in North Andover. This was just a... Yeah, again, the light was just in my favor that day, and you know, it was, I ended up chasing it down to Ballardvale too, and I'm amazed I was able to beat it just because there's really no direct route from here to Ballardvale, I discovered that day. So this shot was one of the first shots I took when COVID really shuttered things, and it was interesting for us because not only did COVID really put a halt on things, my wife and I had also just become new parents too, so it was just a very interesting time for us just figuring out like ways we can keep busy and just ways that we can kind of, just get out and do stuff while still, taking care and being careful with our new family, our new son and everything. So we ended up taking a lot of walks on rail trails, and this was the site of Cherry Brook Station in Weston on the old Central Mass. You can see the restored milepost over there to the right, and it was a very interesting time, but in a lot of ways I was able to do a lot of exploring and spend time with my family while being outdoors. So it was just an interesting period, to say the least. Section house in East Sudbury on the old Central Mass. Bridge remnants in North Reading on, I believe this would have been... Yeah, Salem and Lowell, thank you. These have been sitting here abandoned since 1939, I believe. And just really not too far from a pretty large public park, too. It looks like I had to do a lot of bushwhacking to get there, but I really didn't. You can even see like a building in the background there on the right side. This is, as my 2-year-old would say, this is the nighttime gravel train. The closest stop to our house is Wyoming Hill on the Haverhill line. And for a period, this was in spring of 2020, they were installing positive train control on the Lowell line, which the gravel train normally took every night from Ossipee. But for a while, it was being detoured through Melrose and Wakefield. So, I took advantage, and I always wanted to get some shots of freight coming through my hometown, which it virtually never happens these days. So I just wanted to get some really cool night shots, and it was always neat, like hearing it thundering through late at night and everything. Sort of must have been what it was like back in the days when really heavy tonnage used to come through Melrose. Just a shot at Ballardville, another one with a light being on my side. Just a pretty sunset. This was in Reading. I think I don't know. I was probably just running up to Home Depot for something and just saw the sunset, and I was like, wow, just sometimes you just have to stop and enjoy something for a few minutes. Another Downeaster detour. This is the Forest Street crossing in Wakefield. This has been the site of some accidents over the years. I remember one, I think in like the mid-90s, a low bed trailer got stuck on the... Yeah, I vaguely remember it being a story on the nightly news, and yeah. But one of 3 manned crossing shanties still left on the system. Further south in Wyoming Hill, just the Downeaster coming through on a beautiful day. Sandown, New Hampshire, just took a day off and took my son up there just to do a little exploring. This is an old culvert in Hampstead, New Hampshire, on the Worcester, Nashua, and Portland. Yeah, just a testament. They built all this stuff to last. It's really great what you can still find if you go out there. Freight operations through Reading at night. Again, just one of those things I didn't know if I'd ever see it again. So I got a tip from somebody that freight was coming through. So I just went out one night and caught it. Yep, and I guess I forget what the name of this train. Rick, you or James would probably remember the name of this one. It was Halloween Day, because it got canceled from the springtime due to, and they rescheduled it. I remember it was Halloween. Yeah, Lochmere Limited. Thank you.
Was it 2 years ago? 2 or 3?
What's that?
Was that 2 or 3 years ago? I don't remember.
20, Halloween of 2020.
Yeah, 2020. But yeah, so here it is coming through Weirs Beach, and I chased it down to all the way down to Lochmere. Interestingly enough, there's no snow on the ground here, but Massachusetts, when I left that morning, we had like 2 inches of snow on the ground from just sort of a freak October snowstorm. I really love this shot just because it's always been one I've wanted to take, but in the summertime, you can't really pull off to the side of Route 3 because it's all like sort of private parking and everything. But I took advantage that day, and this shot's one of my favorites. Here we are in Lakeport. Really wish they'd move that power pole. Yeah, Laconia. Yeah, not every day you get to see a train at Laconia, so that was a really nice treat. Yeah, it is magnificent.
What's the police department? I don't know.
An old bunter at East Hampton. We were walking on the rail trail out there, and yeah, just stopped to photograph that in the fall foliage. This is the Vermonter south at North Hatfield, I believe. I think that's the freight house in the background, but it's pretty cool because these trains, they fly through that valley because it's a long, kind of like I-91. It's a very long tangent. So he might have been going like 75 miles per hour maybe, but I
think they're allowed 79 through there.
Yeah, so I mean, he just, like, I saw the headlight, the next thing you knew, I mean, he was on me. North Chelmsford, this would have been POAY, heading around the Y. This was late fall in Bedford. I was driving by one night and Bud car was all lit up, and had never actually seen it lit up at night, and it was very foggy that night, so just kind of took advantage. And our beloved 410 all ready for Christmas after an early December snowstorm. Another snow shot at Wyoming Hill. It's interesting over the years, like I'll see these images in books that people take of trains during snowstorms, and my first question is, how on earth did they get to that location in weather like that? So I was lucky enough, I could just walk like 10 minutes down the road to get this picture, but this is on the Northern Strand Rail Trail in Saugus. It's a little hard to see, but you have Boston 10 miles on the left, then actually West Lynn 2 miles on the right. Just kind of hidden off there on the side in the foliage. Back at East Deerfield, this is 2021 we're in now. I realize I haven't been good at keeping you guys informed of the years, but we're getting up to the present day.
Is that from the new bridge?
Yes, that is from the new bridge. They've actually.
Looks different.
yeah, that wouldn't have been possible with the shot in Athol when I was driving home a few days later. Not the best picture, but I had never actually seen a train in Athol, so I just kind of.
Down about a mile, you can see the old Boston and Albany two-stall roundhouse.
Yeah, I've seen overheads of that on Google Maps. I've never gone out to check it out, but rain shot in Ballard Vale. Another old culvert in Andover next to Haggart's Pond, I think it's called. Yeah, this line's been abandoned a very, very long time. But
Machine shop.
yeah, I think machine shop, I think.
Originally, what was that, the line out to Lawrence, wasn't it? Or?
Would have been.
Okay, crossing at Wyoming Hill, West Wyoming Avenue, and my little guy calls this the purple train. I got a print made of this, and it hangs in his bedroom now.
That's great.
Oh, we're up there already, huh?
Yep, got to start him young, right?
That's right.
This shot I took a few summers ago up in Pine Point. Got the fishing boats and the bridge about to be reconstructed in Melrose. That bridge, the original bridge, dated back to 1922, so lasted us a good century. So the new bridge has since been installed and seems to be serving its purpose. Haven't heard of any trains falling on Linfels Parkway just yet. So. Another shot of the nighttime gravel train, I'll call it, in Reading this time. Summer shot at Weirs Beach. Loon Cove Station, which now sits preserved in Alton at the little railroad-themed playground they have. And I believe this sat off in the woods just outside of Alton for many, many years. It might have been being used as a summer cabin or something along those lines, but just nice to see it being nicely restored, fresh coat of paint. Yep, there's my little guy enjoying the milepost just like his father does. Yep, it's always... I know, it's always amazing just to see they look at them, the wonder in his eyes and everything.
He'll be able to read by the time he's in first grade.
Yeah, at the very least, he'll be able to read mileposts, So. This is a shot, Mystic Junction out in Charlestown, which once had a massive freight complex, as we all know, and not much left today, but there's still some bits and pieces that you can find. And yeah, we just took a little drive over there one morning. I explored a bit.
Whereabouts now?
Near Mystic Junction Freight Yards in Charlestown, Mass. Yeah, so not too far from North Station, probably like maybe a mile or.
Is that on the branch?
Yeah, that was on the branch heading out to the wharfs or the yards back in the day.
You can see the power station in Everett. You can see the power
Oh, okay,
station.
yeah, the smokestacks.
Located that way.
Downeaster, heading into North Station, the maze of highway ramps overhead. Many of those didn't exist 20, 25 years ago when I started photographing. Bellows Falls, the searchlights, which I believe are going to come down pretty soon. Okay, Winona, crossing over that one-lane underpass. This is the fall foliage special heading north to Plymouth. Okay, so a few interesting things to point out in this shot. First off, that's our own Jim Nixis riding up front there. Secondly, you'll notice I mentioned the freight house earlier on, which is now gone in this shot and has been replaced by that box of apartments. I think it's like student housing for Plymouth State or something along those lines. And what I think is really cool about this shot too is you can see there's a mother and her son over there on the right side, because I was with my own son. We were watching the train from that side, and she was with her son on the other side watching the train. So just kind of a nice nice shot of a young rail fan in the making. Then later that day, we caught the train at Ashland. So. This was just kind of almost like a throwaway shot. I got a new 35mm lens for my camera, and I was just kind of testing it out around my neighborhood, and just caught this shot of the rebuilt F40 coming through Cedar Park. But I just really liked how it came out with the colors, and in my opinion, I feel like that's a very sharp paint scheme that the trains now have. Another westbound freight at Ballardvale with the Pan Am. Downeaster going south through Plastow, heading to Boston. The depot has been restored and repainted. It's now a photography studio. So pretty cool in my opinion. The Downeaster heading north through West Medford in this winter scene. Flagman on the crossing. Again, one of 3 flag monitored crossings left on the system. Exploring the remains of the Woburn branch. Not really much left, just the right-of-way and a telegraph pole there. Considering this was an operation up until like 1981, there's really not much to see of it, which is kind of remarkable. But Waverly. Yeah, once Central Mass and the Fitchburg were on 2 different lines through here, but were consolidated, and they depressed the whole right-of-way here. And just an interesting little tidbit too, the trackless trolleys that used to run up overhead have been discontinued by the MBTA. I never was able to get a shot of a train and a trackless at the same time, so sometimes things work out and sometimes they don't, I've learned over the years.
There are electric buses up there now.
Yeah, it seems to be the way things are headed. So, interesting shot. I actually did not make it to the Springfield train show last year because we had about 30 inches of snow. So this was kind of my constellation prize that weekend. I went down the street to get this shot of the commuter rail dashing through the snow. But I think the irony was, I think Springfield only got like 3 inches out of that storm. But I remember opening the garage door and seeing the snow and being like, yeah, I might have to wait till next year. These are bridge piers for the extension of the old Essex branch into Conomo across the Marsh, which still, yeah, that's what I thought too, Bill, when I saw them. We pulled into the parking lot of Great Marsh Brewery, and initially we were trying to go in there and get a beer, but the tap room was too busy, so I sort of poked around out behind for a few minutes and got that shot. Just pretty cool to see. It's still in existence. Marblehead 0 milepost in the center of Marblehead. Yeah, so that was right next to the bank there. So this is the only shot. We're reaching the end of the presentation, and this is actually the only shot that is not on B&M rails, but I just really like this shot so much I had to include it. Just a CT rail heading south out of Springfield, and yeah, just a really, I found out about this overhead bridge that gives you this perspective of the city. I've always been a big fan of city skyline shots, and I think this one really. Another shot of the Downeaster in West Medford. Again, my 2-year-old, he labels this unit the red train. Then the blue unit, the blue commemorative unit, he's labeled the blue train. So that's how we differentiate things in the household these days. Littleton Depot. It's a beautiful station. I kind of wish they'd clean up some of that junk lying around it, but really, at least it's true to its B&M heritage with the colors, nonetheless. So there's the blue train. Yep, Wakefield Junction. You can see some of the old platform curbing in the foreground, and yeah. Chelsea, the new commuter rail station.
Oh my.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. The Silver Line stops right next to it too for that sort of intermodal. Pan Am freight heading south or heading west through Vale, just north of Ballard Vale. Pretty heavy tonnage on that freight. This is not the jungles of Borneo. This is actually the Central Mass in Waltham.
It's all ripped up now.
Yeah, they're building the rail trail. So I went, tried to get some final documentary shots. So I had the pleasure of doing some explorations with Ken Jackman as well, who's also a member of the society. He's big into mileposts, very much like I am. And we explored the old Portsmouth and Dover, which surprisingly still has several mileposts along, I believe it's called Spur Road, which parallels Route 16. And this one here, you have Portsmouth 7 on the left side, Dover 4 on the right side. And there was also P6 D5 a mile down the road, which, considering this was abandoned from since the 30s, I think, was really quite remarkable. The end of the Northern Strand, I don't even know why I included this shot, to be honest, just kind of sort of a perspective of kind of what these lines look like long after abandonment. This is just outside of West Lynn, where the rail trail currently ends. The Cliftondale Depot on the Saugus branch, which has been really nicely restored.
That's very old.
Yeah.
That goes back to
Another exploration with Ken Jackman on the Merrimack branch. We found this milepost was off to the side, sort of buried under foliage. And Ken remembered finding this with his uncle many, many years ago, and we wanted to see if it was still there. And sure enough, it was. And it was really, really cool just to find it hidden away there in the woods. 494 at White River Junction on a recent trip to Vermont we took. Now, this shot I've always kind of loved, too, because it really shows the transformation from the rail trail to the abandoned railroad. And this is in Weston, just beyond the bridge that the Central Mass crossed the Fitchburg on. And, it's a pretty well-utilized rail trail. Me, my wife, and my son, we went out on it to explore. It gets very sunny, so if you take your sunscreen if you ride it, but it's definitely an interesting ride with a lot of historic artifacts. So we come to the second to last shot in the presentation, and on Father's Day, I had a great morning with my family. Then in the afternoon, I heard reports that after the CSX acquisition, the OCS train was going to be removed from Pan Am Rail, aka B&M Rail, and I really wanted to try to see it one final time. So I went up to Plastow to get next to the historic B&M depot, just to get the juxtaposition of the Pan Am train hooked to the CSX engines just out of sight to the right there, getting pulled through and being removed from the property. And I remember thinking at the time, is this sort of the end of the B&M as we know it? Does this kind of mark the end of my whole connection to the Boston and Maine Railroad in some way, shape, or form? But I learned that wasn't necessarily the case, because I always like to end things on a good note, and I had the pleasure of taking my 2-year-old son on the Winnipesaukee Scenic last July, and we just had a wonderful ride. I mean, hats off. It's a great organization, and just We had such a blast riding it, and he just loved every minute of it. And I realized, just like when I was a child, the sort of the mystique, the mystery, the interest in the Boston and Maine Railroad that I acquired, maybe someday he'll also acquire it as well. And maybe someday he'll go off and explore just like I've been exploring all these years. And I realize I'll continue to do so. And I'll do it with him as he gets older and can do more and more of it. So I guess I'll just like to end by saying, you know, just because there's not as much as there was, 40, 50 years ago, that's not to mean that there's not still a lot out there. So I really want to just reinforce the fact of go out, have fun, check out that rail trail that's nearby. Check out the old station that might be a few towns over. Just sort of get out there, see what you can find and explore. And because very much like in my case, you may find out that there's so much more than you ever would have imagined still exists. So with that, thank you so much for coming on this journey of 25 years with me. And I just want to thank everyone for coming. And hopefully, if anyone out here is not a member, hopefully you'll consider joining. And, just thank you all. It's really been a pleasure to share all this with you.